the average age of a caregiver is 46. So a 46-year-old woman has children at home. Maybe they're not babies anymore, but they're still youngish and they need support and they need care and they eat and they're home and they are also taking care of their aging parents. So this sandwich generation, what can you do and what are you willing to do and can do? And by having these conversations, you discover what can be done. And once you discover what can be done, what are your wishes, you start matching your finances. So, can we afford this? Is there a legal document that support this decision? Because that's important as well, so nobody forgets. And there is a whole legal system behind that will provide that help and will protect our loved ones' wishes. So that's really important to have that as well as a whole system that everything we tick all the boxes and making sure that it's there.
Discussions in this show should not be construed as specific recommendations or investment advice. Always consult your investment professional before making important investment decisions. Securities offered through registered representatives of Cambridge Investment Research, a broker-dealer member FINRA SIPC. Advisory services through Cambridge Investment Research, Inc., a registered investment advisor. Cambridge and Houston First Financial Group are not affiliated.
Welcome to Money Matters with Chris Hensley, where we spotlight financial literacy issues in the Houston community and beyond. And now your host, Chris Hensley.
Good afternoon and welcome to Money Matters. I'm Chris Hensley. We have a fantastic guest for you today. We've got Isabel Melgarejo. I hope I'm saying it correctly here. And you are a caregiving planner whose personal experiences and professional expertise have driven your mission to support family caregivers. After navigating the challenges of caregiving in your own life, Isabel designed a program to help others find balance, connection, and strength during difficult times. She's also the host of Time to Care, the Caregiver Podcast, which she shares insights and practical advice for those on their caregiving journeys. Get ready to be inspired as we dive deep into Isabel's story and her strategies for navigating life's toughest seasons with resilience and grace. Isabel, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me here, Christopher.
Absolutely. Well, we're super excited to have you here. I was on your podcast on Wednesday, so I think of this as almost a continuation of that conversation, but we're switching the microphone around here. So for listeners who may not be familiar with you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself that they may not know?
So I work with family caregiver, aka people that are taking care of their parents, a spouse, or an older child. And I take them from feeling overwhelmed, not knowing where to find resources, not knowing what to do or where to start, to feeling empowered and knowing exactly what to do, having a very strong um self-care routine that prioritizes their care so they can keep providing for their loved ones.
I love it. I love it. And now your actual, personal journey has kind of shaped this. Can you share how your personal journey has helped you with, spreading that passion to supporting other caregivers?
Of course. So I first became a family caregiver when I was 20 years old. And my dad passed away suddenly, which was unexpected, not planned. And that, independently of the grief, that put my mom in a very stressful situation. She was very depressed in the process. She lost a house. Um, and I was just trying to make sure that we were both eating. I was still living with my parents back then. I was just trying to make sure that there was food on the table, that we were getting um like just life, that the bills were getting paid, and just trying to get that over with. It never occurred to me to ask for help. It never occurred to me to outsource or involve others in the journey. And 5 years ago, I moved away from Mexico City to Fort Worth, and I started noticing that my mom would start asking me for support and help in things that I couldn't help anymore. She would call me and she would ask me like, "Hey, how do my Netflix got disconnected?" I'm like, "I can't help you. If I can't see your TV, how am I supposed to help you?" And that was a very eye-opening time for me. And I realized that if I didn't start building a community of care, if I didn't start involving my other siblings, and if I didn't have a plan, there would be a time in which her needs were real. And by real, like not having Netflix, probably it is a real situation, but it's not an urgent one. So there would be a time in which she would actually need urgent help for whatever reason, and there would be nobody for her. So I started looking around, I started talking with people, and my project management brain came to life. And I started developing a program for myself that would help me help my mom do whatever she wanted to do.
That makes sense. I love that. You gave us some real life examples here where your dad passes and you had never thought when it did come time for you to help, you had never thought about asking for help or outsourcing before. And then you gave us these examples, these real life examples. I kind of chuckled when you said Netflix because I think that's a common one with everybody, right? Hey, it's not VCR anymore. My VCR is not working, but whatever it is, right? We need some help there. So you made a distinction though between a real problem or an urgent problem. It's possible that the Netflix problem is a real problem, but is it an urgent problem? And so this is a different way that you're thinking about it. And you went as far as even using that project management skill set that you have for creating this skeleton or this kind of system in place for caregivers to really get support and kind of look at those best practices. Let's dive a little bit deeper into that and talk about caregiving challenges and solutions. What are some of the most common challenges family caregivers face, and how does your program address these challenges?
I think it's different from person to person. For a lot of people, the financial burden, it is a real thing. There are a lot of caregivers that need to quit their jobs to care for for their loved ones. There's a lot of caregivers that worry about money running out before their loved ones pass. So I think money, and you're really good. You have amazing resources on your website and on your podcast that anybody can access to them. So I think that is one problem that a lot of people face. Um, Other common issues are communication. Um, we are, as a society, I think we have a lot of taboos around many subjects. We are afraid about talking about death. We are afraid of talking about being sick or growing old. And we think that if we start talking about those things, we're going to invoke them and make them a reality. And instead of just being aware that that happens and it can be a reality and making sure that we are consistently taking care of those things that could happen, instead we just shove them away and never talk about them. So that's a huge problem because when things happen, we don't know what to do. When we're facing that situation, when we need to make a decision between plugging the cord from the oxygen and all these tubes that are into our loved ones, is that something that they wanted, or are we making a decision based on ourselves? And because we never had that conversation, we don't know. So that is another common topic that goes. And something else that happens very often is that all the responsibility falls in one person. I know you're an only child, so you're expected to take a responsibility of all of it. But the truth is that you can outsource. You can ask for support from other friends and family that are close to your parents. But we don't do that. We don't invite other people in that part of the journey. So that is another very common mistake that, or not mistake, I think it's just assuming that you have to be responsible for all the care. And we are afraid of inviting others and accepting how others solve problems. So if you want clean laundry, there is a lot of ways in which you can have it. You can hire someone to clean it. You can go to a cleaner. You can wash it at home, or you can buy new clothes. There's a lot of ways to have clean clothes every day, and everybody's gonna see that problem in a different way. So same happens with caregiving. There is a lot of ways of serving and having and solving a problem.
I love it. I love it. So a lot to unpack there. We started with the challenges, right? Just the idea of, some people worry about, do I have to quit my job to be a caregiver? And you think about the financial implications of that. So that's a heavy, big decision, right? Or just that worry of money running out was something that you mentioned there that's also weighing on people. You talked about taboos and really the idea of talking about death and growing old and just people being afraid that if you talk about it, you're invoking it, right? So that's not, we're talking about having these real life difficult conversations. You even mentioned that, the idea of whether to put somebody on life support or not, those end of life discussions. And you advocated for us having those discussions with family members. Let's keep diving into that or talking about that. In your opinion, what are the first steps families should take when beginning to plan for caregiving responsibilities?
I think the first step is doing before you need it, because you can do it with a neutral brain. You're not going to be affected by the reality. And even though it's very hard to go through that process, it is a hypothetical. So that's what I recommend. Start having these conversations and start having conversations with your loved ones. So a common conversation could be like, hey, where would you like to age in place? So
Tell us what that means for people who aren't, may not be in our shoes where we're having these conversations. People, what's the difference between aging in place and other options for people?
So aging in place means that they are aging where they live. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they are aging in the same house. It just means that they are in their same house or in a house. And they could even live with a loved one.
Mm-hmm.
And then there is also elder care communities or senior care, memory care. So depending on what your loved one needs, like with really advanced dementia, the recommended place would be memory care, where you have someone taking care of your loved one 24/7. You can do that at home. It's just going to be more expensive. So that's why it is important to have these conversations to understand what are the wishes, and understanding what are your loved one's wishes. What is, like, mom wants A, B, C, and D, and I want A, B, C, and D as the caregiver. I don't want to be a 24/7 caregiver. I have children. I have to take care of them as well. So what are those conditions? The average age of a caregiver is 46. So a 46-year-old woman has children at home. Maybe they're not babies anymore, but they're still youngish and they need support and they need care and they eat and they're home and they are also taking care of their aging parents. So this sandwich generation what can you do and what are you willing to do and can do? And by having these conversations, you discover what can be done. And once you discover what can be done, what are your wishes, you start matching your finances. So, can we afford this? Is there a legal document that support this decision? Because that's important as well, so nobody forgets. And there is a whole legal system behind that will provide that help and will protect our loved ones' wishes. So that's really important to have that as well as a whole system that everything we tick all the boxes and making sure that it's there.
I love it. I love it. So, this discussion touches a lot of different areas there. Just with what you just mentioned, these legal documents, the idea of there is a system in place that kind of drives some of that stuff. We started by saying, you told us to do this before you need to, have these conversations before you need to. And the legal documents that you ended with, that's very important because some of these things can't go online once the cognitive decline starts kicking in. So having that conversation is super important. You gave us an average age of a caregiver of about 46, which I'm shocked I did not realize. I'm 50 and I'm complaining, and I realized, okay, well, I had some wiggle room there in the years. So okay, that's good to know for sure. You talked about, also juggling, right? That sandwich generation, you having your generation above you, still having children where tuition, college education, getting the kiddos off to school, all of that stuff's on the line as well. And then you're having to balance it, right? And really just the conversation of, do they want to age in place? And that doesn't necessarily mean their own home. They could come live with you, but the idea is that there's a separation between that and a skilled medical facility, right? And you gave some examples of senior care, memory care, when there's things like advanced dementia or Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, things where those might come online as well. Let's pivot and talk a little bit about the program that you've come up with. How does your program incorporate both emotional and logistical support for caregivers?
So I work with caregivers in three different levels. The first level is understanding where they are and where they want to be, what they envision of that journey. As a financial advisor, you do exactly the same thing. When you start working with a client and in, I don't know, a year, every year you connect with your clients and you talk like, okay, what's next? What do you envision for the future? Is this reality still valid and real for you, or is there anything we need to change? So having that in mind and getting to know and connect and understanding where we want to be and we want that journey. So I help them paint that picture and paint that canvas, understanding what are their non-negotiables. It's very common that we don't build boundaries around our self-care. So I help them build that vision so they start building those boundaries. And as a main key point during this process, I help my clients learn how to have difficult conversations. And it's not teaching them because we all know how to have them. We know what we need to say, but it's changing the mindset that help us break those barriers of having those conversations. So making, instead of being afraid or being anxious about that conversation, how can we change those feelings of some of probably just neutrality? I'm being neutral about this topic so I can talk about it. So it's helping them with that mindset. Then I work with a very detailed plan based on what you want or what you want to achieve. What are the things that need to happen? Do you need to start saving more right now? Or maybe do you need to start visiting places where you can move your parents? Or do you need to prove your house or your parents' house to assure that you can build rails and change the bathroom so they can age in place? Those are the things that you think about. I have this specific client who has stairs all over her home. She wants to age in place. Her current home is not going to be probably that place for her. If she starts losing mobility, she will have to move to another home that will accommodate for her. So those are the things that we start looking around. And before this client falls and she needs to go somewhere else, she knows that she needs to start looking for another place. And the third part of the process is building that self-care foundation. I don't know if you're into morning or evening routines. I am big on them. I love having a very well established morning and evening routines, and those support the caregiver so much because that will provide self-care every day. So they are having that special moment with themselves to connect, to understand what they want, and refill their cups every day.
I love it. I love it. So a lot of good stuff that you just mentioned there. I mean, the idea of having neutrality or objectivity, these are really, really emotionally charged topics that we're talking about. And so the value of having somebody step in and kind of see it from a bigger picture is really important for them then to go in and make those decisions, right? So I see that that's super important there. We've got just about 8 minutes before the show's over, and I wanted to ask you about the podcast as well, because all of this work that you've been doing is such a great thing that you're doing right now. What inspired you to start your podcast, and what do you hope listeners take away from it?
So I mostly talk about self-care in the podcast, and even when I bring experts in other subjects, I try to bring it in. How can you find self-care with this information? And it can be financial self-care, because if you're worried about money, then you're worried all the time. And ask me how I know that, right?
How do you know that? No.
With $3,000 being paid for doggy care plus another like 1,500 in my car today.
Holy smokes! Holy smokes!
So yeah, it's been an expensive month.
Yes, pets are. There are family members, but they are never cheap. Every time go to the vet, that runs the bill up for sure. For sure.
Yeah. What was the question? Oh, the podcast.
Yes. Yes.
So I talk a lot about self-care and how can you achieve it? How can you gift yourself 10 minutes of self-care every day? I've had people come and talk about home organization, for example, and how you can keep your home organized with just 10 minutes a day. And I think for family caregivers and juggling so many responsibilities, that is very useful because we all have 10 minutes okay, I have this 10 minutes that I'm going to gift myself every day. So that is all about how you can provide for yourself mental well-being or physical well-being or pleasure, anything.
I love it. I love it. The idea of, self-care is huge for caregivers because often they're not putting themselves ahead. And if you don't, you will burn out, right? You won't have the bandwidth to take care of your other family members, your loved ones. You talked about routines. You talked about home organization. All of these are things to kind of disrupt the caregiver burnout, right? Or compassion fatigue, which is something you see in medical or healthcare workers, right? It is a very real thing. I love it. I love it. Lots of really, really good stuff here. Let me ask you about what you think, from a broader perspective. What societal changes do you think are needed to better support family caregivers?
I think we need to start the conversation. If you talk with anybody in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space, they will say that like we don't know what we don't know. So if we have never been caregivers, if we have never been in that situation, we don't know what it is. The good thing about this topic is that we are all subjected to care. We are either become a caregiver or we will eventually need care. We're all in this journey. It doesn't matter race, gender, political views, nothing. We are all in this together. So just opening the conversation and being brave enough to say it out loud and sharing it with everybody. And it's just making it aware. And if you're in these positions, like it depends where your passions are. But if you're a very political person, maybe you can write a letter to your representative, like, hey, this is going on. This is a real issue. We are all affected by this reality. How can we change regulations to protect caregivers? If you're very active at work and you're part of committees or something else, you can bring this subjects ahead and tell everybody, like, hey, we're in this together. How can we support caregivers so they don't quit their job down the line? If you are a stay-at-home mom, you can also be talking about these things. How can you prepare for this time in your life? And especially if you are expected to be that person and that point of contact, you can start having these conversations and preparing, talking with your loved one. How can I support you the best?
I love it. I love it. So this is, you're very correct that we are all in this together, right? So this is one of those things. I think generational communication has something to do with it as well, because it doesn't quite come online until you see it, right? A lot of life triggering events. I mean, in my business, I find that that's very true. It's hard to get people motivated to do things like estate planning until they have somebody near them that passes, or if they see how much it costs to put somebody into a nursing facility, right? And then it's like, oh, okay, so that's kind of a trigger for them to do that. But you also gave us some hope here. You said, if you're somebody who's active, you can write your politicians locally and let them know that this is something that needs to be discussed and advocated for. Even if you're just at work and you're sharing and talking, letting people know that this is a thing and that we're all in that situation together. I think we will be surprised the kind of dialogue that will bring with coworkers, right? Because it's everybody. I've got clients that are millionaires, and some of the craziest thing is it doesn't matter how much money you have. Once mobility issues kick online, goodbye to the bucket list. You're tied to the house, or you're tied to certain areas. So there's things that when life catches up that are very common experiences with us across our lives, right? Well, Isabel, I love it. We're right here at the end of the show. What have I forgot to ask you that you'd like to share with listeners today?
I think you covered everything. I really enjoyed the conversation, the fast pace, and I know this is like always talking with you is fantastic. The time flies.
Well, I love it. I love it. And Isabel, for listeners who want to find out more about you, about the podcast, about how to get started in your program, how can they do that? Where would they go, and would they get in touch with you?
They can go to my LinkedIn account. I'm very active there. So Isabel Melgarejo. So I can share the links with you. I think that would be easiest. So they can find me on LinkedIn. They can find me on my website at timcool.com. Cool in French for heart.
You might need to spell that one out. Not ever. What is the website again?
It's TUMCOEUR.com. And then they can also find me on my podcast every week on A Time to Care, the Caregivers Podcast.
Got it. Love it. And if you're driving right now, you don't have to write it down. We're going to have all of this in the podcast notes as well. Thank you, Isabel. Have a great rest of the afternoon.
Thank you so much for having me over.